Hello everyone! This video is part of a series where we are developing a microservices-based social media application, and we are using NodeJS for the backend services and React for the front-end client. Our main goal here is to learn the microservices patterns, as well as some of the main challenges that come with them and some possible solutions. So here is an overview of our current tasks and our plan for the near future. Of course, there is much more than this, but you can have a look if you want to get familiar with the project. In this second screen, there is a much more detailed breakdown of tasks, and you can pause the video and look at it if you want. Of course, there is much more coming in the near future, or not so near, right? Because there is still a lot to implement here. We also use a Jira board to track the progress of our tasks, so you will see me coming and going to the board here quite often. In the previous video, I presented this overview of our process for signing up, and if you are not familiar with it, you can pause the video here and have a look at it as well, because in this video we will start working on the verification logic. We are using a test-driven approach, which means that I will start writing tests for our functionality before actually implementing the production code. So let me clear my console and I will start my test watcher. npm run test watch. Right? This will start Jest and it will watch for changes in the files and rerun the tests every time we change the files. So currently every test is passing, and it should be like so. Let's add then a new test here. Now we are interested in thinking how can we identify that a user is verified. Right? So this will be done by a Boolean flag, which is going to be marked in our user model every time we create a user. And so when we create the user, we want to set the value of this isVerified flag to false. So the user will never be created with a isVerified of true. They always have to verify their emails. It may be the case that we want to automatically verify the email of the user, maybe for some special reason, I don't know. But this will have to be done outside of our user model. We will not, within our user model, we will not allow a user to be created with a isVerified of true. Okay, and this more design decision, if you think differently, if you think that it would make sense for the user to be able to create it with a isVerified flag of true, then you can go ahead and you can change. The implementation is not going to be very different. Actually, it's going to be less work if you want to allow this. But because I thought it would be interesting not to allow this, so that we can also explore a few of Mongoose features, then we'll do it like so. For our purposes here, it's going to be fine. There will be no major problems if we always create the user with the isVerified flag to false. So within my user.test.ts file, what I want to test is that it should set isVerified to false when the value is not provided. So if I'm creating a user without passing a isVerified flag to that user document, so let's maybe go back a little bit to our sign-up route and just to refresh our memories how we create a user. Right, so we are here within this try statement. We are creating a new user by calling the user.create method and then passing the properties that we want to save in this new user instance or this new user object. So what I want to do is, if the value for isVerified is not provided, then I want to set it to false. Right? So in this case, for example, it should directly set it to false. So how do I test that? Well, it's very straightforward. Here I can just create a new user by calling the await user.create method, and here I will pass, I think, the user info is already at the top with a valid information. Exactly, so it's already here. We can just use the same, and we can do that because we are cleaning up our database before each test. So there is no remaining or no dangling user objects with the same information. Once I create this, I would expect my new user dot is verified, right? So this, something like so, dot to equal false. You can either say to equal false or to be falsy, but this to be falsy here, it's more general than the to equal false. Why is it so? If I hover over here and maybe I come to the definition, it says when you don't care what a value is, you just want to ensure a value is false in a Boolean context. Now, this is tricky. It doesn't say a lot of things, right? But what happens is, for example, undefined would also be considered falsy, or null would also be considered falsy. So this is a bit too general for us. I really want to use the to equal false here. I want to make sure that the value is correctly populated. Now, if I save this, what is going to happen is, you may already imagine, because of this red line here, underscore line, tests will fail, right? And you probably already know the reason if you're following the videos. The reason is that this is verified is not defined as a property of our user. So now that we have managed to make our test fail, we can go back to production code and write just enough code so that our tests pass. Let's go back to the user model. And here, within the schema definition and the user document definition, let's declare a new field called isVerified. And this isVerified is going to be a Boolean, and it's going to be required, right? So maybe it doesn't need to be required. Maybe we can mark this as not required, but it will be required within our user schema, right? Or it will always be there. So whenever I'm creating a user, I may pass the isVerified field. And if I don't pass it, I want to populate it as false, right? Because then if I mark this as an optional field with this question mark, then I don't need to always be passing it, right? So if I mark this as required, every time I create a new user, I need to say isVerified colon false. And this may be just a little bit annoying in development. So I'll mark this as optional, and down here within the declaration of my user schema, I will create a new field of isVerified, and this is going to be of type Boolean, now with a capital B, because that's the JavaScript type Boolean, so or exactly the Boolean object, right? So the JavaScript Boolean object is not the same as the TypeScript type Boolean. And here I want to set a default value, and this default value is going to be false, right? So now I am able to populate the isVerified field with a default value that will be always populated if the isVerified field is not provided, right? So now if I save my file, this should make our tests pass. Now I can access the isVerified property of my user, and I can check whether it is equal to false. Give it a couple of seconds. I think everything should work here. Exactly, everything is working. So now we are automatically setting the isVerified flag to false when the value is not provided. So before we continue, I just want to make a little change here. And I don't like extending an empty interface. I just noticed this in this video. So I will use a type here. And there's a lot of discussion, not a lot of discussion, but there is some discussion what is the correct way to go with interfaces and types. And to be fully honest, I'm giving my opinion. my opinion here, not the best guideline or how TypeScript does it. But from my perspective, I like to use these types, which are a shorthand for a type alias in TypeScript. I like to use them to define the shape of objects, right? So the shape of an object, it should have the shape of mongoose.document plus these additional properties, right? If I have the shape of this document, then I can reference this type somewhere else. And the same thing for the user model. I'm saying that the user model is of type, or it has the shape of a mongoose.model that implements the user document as its internal or as its document. The interfaces, for example, that I'm using here in the email API, I think that this is one case where I use an interface here, exactly here. So personally, I tend to prefer interfaces whenever we are defining the public contract of a class, right? So which methods a class needs to implement so that it satisfies, or so that it, so that it satisfies some well-defined shape, right? And this shape, these public methods that should be implemented, I like to declare them in an interface. So you will see that I'll try to follow this pattern and be consistent. Maybe there is some refactoring that I need to do in some files here, but once I see that, I'll do it immediately. But I will try to use interfaces whenever we are talking about methods that are supposed to be implemented by a class. And I will use types whenever we are defining the shape of an object. Now this is again a matter of personal preference, and if you want to do this differently, that's not a problem. Okay, most of the times types and interfaces can be switched, they can be exchanged with one another without loss of functionality. There are some advantages or some properties, I wouldn't call them advantages, but there are some properties of interfaces that are different from types. For example, if I were to declare an interface with the exact same name in another file, TypeScript is going to allow that, and it's going to merge the definitions. So if I create an email API interface in some other file and I declare another method, then I will have a final interface which has two methods, and this is not allowed with types. If I try to define a type with the same name in another file, TypeScript is going to throw an error. Now, from my perspective, it's much better not to be allowed to do that, because imagine that I declare 10 different interfaces, or 10 interfaces with the same name but with different methods in each of them in 10 different files. So if I want to modify one method of that interface, I need to find the file that has that method, right? And I don't really like that. I don't think that's scalable. I don't like this approach at all. So that's why I will use types whenever we are, or that's why I will also use types, right? So interfaces are going to be something that I will use whenever I need these methods, but I will definitely avoid declaring an interface with more or with the same name in more than one file. This is more of a design principle that I like to follow, but it's up to you. Yeah, so this was just a small discussion that I wanted to make. Good, so now we have the isVerified flag within our user, and I will simply save this again. This is not going to cause any tests to fail because I just changed the type here. And once the tests finish running, I'll stop the code, run prettier, I will run linting, I'll commit. And then in the next video, we will come back here and we will implement some pre-hooks from Mongoose logic so that we can enforce that this isVerified flag is always populated when the user is created. If you're interested in getting notifications about the next videos that are going to be uploaded to my channel, both in this series and in other series I'm working on, then make sure to subscribe to the channel, and every time I upload a new video, you will receive a notification. Thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.